Hello, everybody, and welcome to the quest for the best director podcast, aka greatest movie director podcast ever, aka a chance where Derek gets to flex his knowledge about William Shakespeare. I'm your host, Matthew Moore, and joining me is a guy who is known to get a bit sick whenever he sees a beautiful woman, Caleb Ferguson. Caleb, what's going on?
Hi Matthew, I'm excited to podcast today. It's been a hot
It's been
minute,
a
so
while.
I am ready to tear into this thing.
Yeah, we'll get to the movie in a sec. I am also quite excited. It feels like it's been forever since our last podcast. I'm not gonna say whose fault that is, but it was Derek's. So moving on. Also joining us is someone who is neither fish nor flesh. Derek Krasinski. Derek, what's going on?
I wish I was a fish.
I wish you were flesh,
Oh,
because I'd know where I'd have you. Okay. With all those cute little introductions out of the way, this is the Quest for the Best Director podcast. Each week we pit two directors against each other, finding the greatest director ever. This week it is Orson Welles versus Stanley Kubrick. Really a battle of the titans. Stanley Kubrick, if he ends up winning this, it is not for a lack of competition.
That's true.
He had to go against David Lean, then Fellini, and now Wells. And he's won. It's not like he lost any either. He's just had it rough.
Kubrick's really consistent too. I think he has a good chance of making it real
for sure.
far.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's left, right?
Yeah, he's got some bangers in there yet.
We still have obviously 2001. We still have Doctor Strangelove, and then we have Barry Lyndon, which I've never seen Barry Lyndon, so maybe it's terrible.
I haven't either.
neither have I.
That's great. We're all great movie watchers here.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the top of it, we're gonna pit two of each other, and it's gonna be Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange versus Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight. And since we're talking about Kubrick a bit, like it's into Clockwork Orange, it is a British film about a man who is about a group of young hooligans. What's the main one's name, guys? Sorry, it's been so.
Alex.
That's right. About a man named Alex who basically he gets thrown in jail after being betrayed by his friends and also after murdering a woman. So it wasn't like he didn't deserve to go to jail. He was pretty much a sociopath. He goes through jail. I think looking up, you can interpret it one way or the other, whether he was actually improving in jail. And he gets a special treatment in which basically it's a Pavlovian sort of response where he's basically tortured so that whenever he sees violence, he gets super duper sick. And he goes out to the real world, and often things don't go too great for him because everyone kind of exploits this, whether intentionally or unintentionally, until he gets he basically tries to commit suicide, but he ends up just being supremely injured. So,
Also, as a side note, since you kind of left that to interpretation, I don't think he became any better in jail, and he was pretty much just acting like it to basically try and get out or get his parole or whatever, or get the Ludovico technique. Because it's honestly one of my favorite scenes in the movie when he's studiously reading the Bible, and everyone thinks that he's finding God, but then we see inside his fantasy, and he's a Roman legionnaire, whipping the shit out of Jesus. That's that scene cracks me up every time.
Yeah, it is really funny. I've actually never seen this movie.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, it's my first time, so it was kind of a journey that I went on because this movie's a bit of a journey.
You could say that, yes.
So what did you think? What is your take as a first? Because I think me and Derek have both seen it before.
Yeah, this is my fourth or fifth time.
Okay, my first take on both of these movies, I think I mentioned this to one of you guys earlier. It's really ironic that we found, for the first time since I believe week 1, we have two English movies, English, main language is English, going up against each other. And ironically, I think it would have been easier to understand some of the foreign language films because there's so much vernacular and jargon and stuff in both of these movies. And, of course, with the Chimes of Midnight, very old English.
That the jargon in Clockwork Orange is so cool too. It adds so much flavor.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
kind of always understand what they're going for, but it just always has such an interesting texture to it. And there's all these like Russian influences. Like uh, a lot of those words are basically just derived for the Russian word for whatever that thing is.
Oh, really?
So it just adds so much like flavor to the world and really like gets your imagination going.
Yeah, the original writer of Clockwork Orange, the novel, was is a linguist. I think he's still alive.
Really, I didn't know that about him.
Cool.
Yeah, and he wrote like some very important literature or work on it.
But yeah, so I was always a bit skeptical about watching this movie because I'm not a big fan of like hyper violent stuff. And whenever it's described to me, people tend to
Mhm.
describe the first half of the movie much more than the second half of the movie. So going in
Hmm.
like, oh, this is bad, and I've heard it gets worse, but the getting worse, I mean, it is like probably more disturbing at the end, but like in a much more compelling way to me than I would have imagined. I ended up really enjoying it.
Hmm. I actually had a
Hyper
conversation.
violence isn't like overdone, you know?
It's sort of an interesting topic because I was talking with some people about this just a few days ago about how like I think a lot of people are naturally repulsed by movies that have violence in them like this,
Mhm.
but that's the point. Like
Yeah, exactly.
people are like, "Ooh, I don't want to watch this movie because it's violent," but that's the point. You're supposed to be sitting in your seat wanting to be able to turn it off. Like it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. So it's not a bad thing that it's like hard to watch necessarily because that's exactly what the point of it is. Like it's supposed to definitely show that this guy Alex is pretty much just evil and has like almost no redeeming qualities and make him like really hard to root for, I guess in a way. But I don't know. I've seen this movie quite a few times, and the ultimate like meaning of it, or like if there's like a moral or any sort of point, it still eludes me. I don't really know like what I'm supposed to take from this movie at the end. Did you guys have any idea?
Yeah, cause like the whole thing is like this how this movie set up is that like at the beginning he's like totalitarian, and like at the end he's all like trying to get help from like the more leftist people, and it's like both try to fuck him up
Yeah.
basically. Like no matter what, there's no like no side that's like with him, and that are not. They both have like the same like maybe slightly different goals like on the ground, but overhead look the same, and their means are basically the same anyway. Like they're both trying to use this dude as like a puppet to get what they want.
Yeah, but like, so what do you think it's saying about? Do you think the point then is that like
Like
left and right wing politics are the same? Because I feel like it has to go deeper than that. Like,
I don't think it means that they're the same, but that ultimately their means are they in given the choice they would pick the same means, and they're uh definitely not based on more morals.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I do think that's like what you're supposed to take on one level, but I still feel like
Hmm.
there's more. Like, what is it like saying about society? Because
I mean
there's all
that's
these
what it
like
is
kind of
saying.
subtle
That's like
reference to like but the point is that Alex isn't like an anomaly, right? Like he's maybe like one of the worst examples, but it makes many references to like this phenomenon of like the degeneration of the youth or something like that, and basically it just sort of gives you this vibe that like society's going to shit or something. And so I don't think we're supposed to look at this and think of it being the story of Alex, a psychopath. I think he's supposed to be basically like a symptom of some or an example of some larger phenomenon. And yet the name of the story is A Clockwork Orange, right? And this is supposed to kind of reference how the Ludovico tech like strips away his independence and will.
Yeah,
But on the other hand, that's
there's
something that
definitely a lot
definitely
of
should have
fuel.
been done because like he was absolutely like a danger to society. So it's kind of hard to say like, oh, this is about how society exerts like a restraining influence and an oppressive influence on people because like in this story, this is definitely a case where I feel like it's not presented as a bad thing that this man's being restrained. But yet on the other hand, like
It kind of isn't,
We
kind of
see,
isn't, right?
yeah, it's like it's kind of it doesn't really take any firm sides, which is why it's hard for me to like take a big point.
Well,
Well,
so I disagree with that last comment. I think it does take a firm side, but like you're saying, the firm side is so. So I think that like the way the film is shot and stuff, it's shot with a lot of POV shots from Alex's perspective. It's definitely like shot to make you feel bad for Alex, right? But then
Yeah.
of everything we know about Alex, like it's so contradictory to feel bad for him that it leaves you kind of in this mixed sense, right?
Hmm.
And that said, on terms of the free will thing, I think what it might be, Caleb, is that we like to blame like the youth in like the lower classes on like trends in America or in any country, I guess. I say America, but, trends in our countries, right? Our civilization,
Hmm.
right? Which is like you hear them talking like, oh, the youth are just getting crazier, and so. But I think their point is the real problem is the government, right? And it's more of an establishment thing. Like these same youth that are so crazy are getting hired to be police officers, right?
Yeah.
Alex, he's just a tool by all these government institutions using them as him as their pawn. And when it turns out that he's going to be like evil again at the end, right? Which we can kind of infer from the ending. Then it's like, wow, it's like the government. It's really the government's fault that like he is this way. I think is what we're supposed to kind of take from it. Maybe it was
Yeah.
beginning, who knows? But like we want to like inherently blame everybody else, right? We want to blame like the youth. We want to blame like our fellow lower classmen, right?
Hmm.
Having the greater problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely think it's sort of a
So it's like
condemnation of like modern society for sure.
it's like we as a country have no free will, right? Like we as a society have no free will because we're being so controlled by those in power.
All right, so I agree with a lot of what you said, but I think the counterpoint to this is that like so what your point generally is that like modern society and government and stuff is progressing in such a way that it leads to all these negative effects and violence in the youth and stuff like that. But the counter to that is that all of this violence and stuff is presented as like very like primitivist and like natural. Like this is like the way things are in nature without society because there's I can't remember who he's talking to, but Alex is like, if we see a car we want, we just go take it. If we see a woman we want, we go take her. It's like a very like primitive, like we're just like animals. Like there's food on the trees, we just go reach out and take the food kind of thing. Like, and so I hesitate to say that it's definitely like a society's fault kind of thing. And it's maybe also talking somewhat about how like this like evil is just part of our nature. And then like no matter what society does to try and repress it in these unnatural ways, like evil will always reside inside of us.
well, it's not saying that it will reside within us. It's saying that whether it's questioning whether or not it's moral to do so, not whether it's there or not. I don't think the movie really cares that there's evil within us. It's
And
like not.
So you're saying
also, I think
you're
like
basically saying is it better what you're saying, Derek, that the movie is questioning it's taking the fact that we are evil as granted and it's questioning whether it's moral to try and suppress that evil?
Yes.
no, I don't quite think it's more like just a quick rephrasing. It's more that it takes the fact that we're primal for granted, right? And then I think it kind of sort of blames the great system for almost putting all of these things in front of us, right? Like
Mhm.
who's like the one like like whether it's for better or for worse, Alex is his best person when he's in this jail, right?
Yeah.
Where he
Yeah.
has no temptations and where his instinct, his best route to survival is to be good, right? So it's like
Hmm.
the society, like the structure that people like the government has placed around us makes it so that it is not in our benefit to do good. And because we are about survival and thrival, we will inherently not do the good.
Yeah. That
At
makes
least a lot
sense.
of us will.
Hmm. But I still think that he may be on his best behavior in the jail, but I think that he is not like at his most natural. Like he's not being who he really is. Like he's being false. And I think that's kind of also the point of like the Ludovico technique is that like regardless of what outcomes it results in, it's deeply unnatural. You know, like they're putting these like mysterious chemicals into your body and having these like wires hold open your eyelids, which is like a fundamentally like very unnatural thing. And so maybe a thing we can take is like trying to suppress man's dark urges might be necessary, but it's unnatural, or like I don't know. Does that make sense?
Um, I guess, but at the same time, it's like extremely natural, right? I mean, I just put natural maybe because there's something supernatural about it. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, all they're playing off of is his animal instinct. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like you think of Pavlov. The example was the Pavlov dog, right? He is an animal. He's being triggered to responses. So in that way, like, I think there is this sense of natural,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
and like the fact that like, yeah. So it's hard for me to say that like it's a natural versus unnatural thing. And I understand what you're saying. Where in the jail he wasn't being himself, and like he still has like these like bad urges within him. But I think it's also hinted to us that like he can still improve, right? And just by pretending to be good for long enough, you can maybe even be good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's definitely one of the great points about this movie is that it, without being didactic, it definitely gives you a lot to chew through and think
Sure.
about.
No, I definitely agree. And like, because if you think about, I think the character of the priest is super important in this movie, right? Because is there? It's not really anything for us to like assume the priest is ever like a foolish character, right?
No, yeah, I think actually, oh, you just completely made me realize something because while we were having this conversation, I was struggling to recall any like even slightly major character that was actually like a force for good or like was
Mhm.
ever really rendered in a positive light, and it's the priest. He's like the moral center of
And
this thing
I
because
don't
he
think it's a
behaves
coincidence
well.
that the priest and he's the one that sticks up for Alex, right?
Yeah.
And he believes in Alex. He doesn't believe
Hmm.
in government figures. Kind of
Yeah,
a,
exactly. He's kind of this middle ground where he behaves well and tries to improve Alex, but he distrusts of these like you can call them unnatural methods or whatever that are basically removing his free will.
no. I mean, what he just trusts is the. I just think he just trusts the government as a whole. I just don't think
Well, yeah,
he.
yeah, that too, yeah.
Yeah, which is like kind of like this irony that we have like a true separation of church and state here, right? And
Hmm.
that's actually a lot. There's a reason that that's necessary.
Yeah, so interestingly, like this movie, if anything, has a pro faith or pro religion stance, which I think like a lot of people probably don't take from it, but I think that it definitely has.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, it's definitely pro religion. At least spirituality, if nothing else.
Yeah, for sure. What I love about this movie is that like it does such a good job of like taking society and almost like lampooning it or like taking everything to its most extreme,
Hmm.
like these like rival gangs that are just running around dressed up like Nazis or dressed up in these like hugely absurd outfits, running around raping and murdering people, and like their language is so absurd, and like the record store that he's in is just completely over the top, and everything just seems like it has its roots in the world that we know, but it is totally like some far future abstraction of like everything has gone to the furthest possible point. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like it's almost so silly.
Yeah, no, it really is. Like the movie is both so ludicrous, but like also has like this weird realism to it, that, like makes it worse. But I'm here, Derek. You haven't talked about. What are your thoughts on this movie?
I like the acting of the man that he ends up, or the writer, whatnot, that he, um, like I guess just assaults and rapes his wife, and then she dies, and then
Hmm.
he's a cripple and etc. But I really like that his acting in the last scene. You can see like his expression darken to such an extent that you understand that he is really upset, but like Alex is completely unaware. I thought that was
Mhm.
a good touch.
And that great shot where like when Alex is like whistling, singing in the rain in the bathtub, and then we kind of cut to this the guy like hearing it and how he's like his face is like red and he's like literally just like
Yeah,
shaking
he
uncontrollably.
realizes it.
And like that's such an absurd like way to act that I don't think would work in many other movies because it's so over the top. But like in this absurd world, it just completely makes sense.
I like the idea. I like that you brought up the singing in the rain thing, Caleb, because I think there's also like definitely a comment on film in this movie, right? I mean, Singing in the Rain is about the first sound film,
Oh, I didn't know that.
right? And there's like so many comments. I don't remember like how many of them are done. One I have is it's funny how the colors of the real world only seem really real when you vidi them on the screen, right?
Yeah, dude, that's so true. I love that line.
And I think like between that and Singing in the Rain, which is all about was it? It's like the first sound film, right? And Singing in the Rain's also like this whole realism versus not, where like the whole idea is it's been so long since I've seen the movie. There's like one woman who is like the actual singer, and then like another woman's like fake singing, and then there's like this big reveal at the end that like the fake singer. It's like a whole thing. But the point is all about like revealing the fake and like how what we want to believe is what's in front of us, right? We don't want to believe what's behind the curtain, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to do with like the commentary on film as well, but I can't quite identify that. That's what I was going to ask you guys.
I actually didn't catch that at all, but I think that I wrote down that line. The colors of the world only seem real when you video them on a screen. Like, yeah, I don't know. That resonated with me,
I feel like
but I don't
Singing
really
in the
know what to
Rain
take
is
from
a
it.
specific song to reference. And I believe,
Yeah,
I could be wrong, it's not referenced in the book, from my understanding.
really.
I could be wrong. I know if it is referenced, so I remember I read like something where it was the author of the book talking about some of the differences between the book and movie. Because for things based off of books, it's nice to read that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if you meant that there was no singing in the rain at all. I know that he doesn't sing "Singing in the Rain" the second time.
Okay.
That's not how Mr. Alexander recognizes him. He said that he thinks it's more clever of Kubrick to do it that way.
Uh huh.
So, but I don't know if he sings "Singing in the Rain." Derek, have you read the book?
A long time ago, yeah.
A long time ago, so you don't know about "Singing in the Rain" thing. So, but if so, like it's definitely not like as prominent of a thing in the book as it is in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's just it's something that we need to pay attention to for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think in general, music like lends a lot to this movie because I think the most important like lesson, if there is any, kind of coming back to that, but is that when he's undergoing the Ludovico technique, he then becomes unable to listen to his favorite song, which is
Yeah.
Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and that's kind of like the big like it's like a really minor but really major also at the same time because like his love for music is kind of like the one noble slash beautiful thing inside of Alex that's like not been tainted by like violence and absurdity and stuff. So the fact that like he then loses his ability to appreciate what's truly beautiful in the world is kind of like basically saying that like yeah, you can use all these oppressive tactics to try and like restrain a person's free will, but in doing so, you remove what makes them beautiful. And so I guess that is kind of the one sympathetic trait that Alex has is that like he is a person that can appreciate beauty.
Beauty. Oh, for sure. Very liked. His parents love him.
Mm-hmm.
He does well with women. We see that. Although you can argue that maybe it is a bit degenerative his actions. But like he doesn't seem to stand out in society besides these horrific events that he commits at night with his bros. And then, of course, among those lads, he kind of makes enemies out of them. But they're, well, I guess it can be argued one way or other. I wouldn't say they're exactly, exemplars of society.
Mm.
Really interesting to how is Alex Like, is Alex supposed to be just like any other guy? You know?
Hmm. Yeah, Alex is definitely a pretty interesting in that he's so compelling, but also so despicable at the same time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I also think the shots in the movie are like pretty incredible and also very like prescient of like trends that would crop up in film later. Like this movie, it was very clear that like the whole Wes Anderson style like drew extremely from this movie. With these like kind of like wide angle shots that will just kind of show stuff like straight on, you know what I mean?
Also, the cuts
Mm-hmm.
through the houses.
Yep, exactly. And like it'll just kind of like pan across a room, but like still from this like dead on angle. And also, what I love is that the camera is always looking at something that's visually stimulating. Like, there's
Yeah.
never a dull moment on the screen, whether it's something that's like happening importantly plot wise, or it's just something like that's cool to look at. Like, there's this shot of like, it's like when Alex comes home after his night of degeneracy for the first time, and it just kind of like he starts listening to the Ninth Symphony, and it just kind of like does all these crazy shots like around the room to like all of the like the three Jesuses that are being crucified or whatever, and then like the snake and then the picture of
Oh, that
Beethoven, and
first
it just like
shot is so beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, and it just like jumps between all these things, and then there's like he has that painting on the wall of like the woman like spreading her vagina, and then the snake is like trying to crawl
Mm-hmm.
towards it, and there's like so much like symbolism, and then all this like weird stuff going on. It's just like so kinetic, and then like the sex scene with the two women, how it's just like sped up is like such an
Yeah.
interesting way to present it. And like the music just always keeps things so lively, and it's so interesting to look at constantly. Like there's never a dull moment.
Because it feels so excessive when you're watching it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
A very different kind of excessive than you might have thought going into it, right? You think it's going to be like this, really like gratuitous sex scene, but it's excessive in the fact that it lasts so goddamn long, right? Like, even
Yeah,
more,
the sex scene.
yeah, there's like they'll have sex and then one of them will break and they'll have some more sex and like it just keeps going.
Yeah, and it's so hilarious. But like the fact that it's sped up to me like makes it seem like less like obscene, maybe. Like it seems like less gratuitous that's sped up. You know what I mean? It's like it still gets to be in the movie, but like we're not gonna spend as much time on it because we're just gonna speed it up. Pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, some like just some of those opening scenes are so like you said visually stimulating. Like you said, the scene of him in his room is amazing. Like every single house in the movie is so like intriguing, and obviously like it's weird because like there's a sense of realism, but like, there's also definitely not like you were saying, Caleb, where it's just,
Hmm.
how do some of these houses exist, right? With, like
Yeah.
the weird ass chair, I don't even understand what she was in. And of course, like, I think that opening shot is beautiful, where like they're just slowly zooming out,
Hmm.
like him and the boys.
Yeah, and then like that house also has like a sign out front that just says home in like
Home,
bright glowing
yeah.
letters. It's just like so absurd and like I don't know.
And the movie's also blocked super well. I feel like blocking is something we don't talk about enough, but like I agree with some of this stuff. It's something we should discuss more.
Hmm.
It feels like a play a lot of the time. This is what I noticed. It feels like a play, but you have the freedom to like continually set up and set down over and over and over again. You know what I mean? Where like, there's a lot of triangular formations. There's a lot of like quarter profile cheating, and they'll show the camera like where the audience would be, basically, or I guess like closer up sometimes, but still in that same realm, or
Hmm.
many like weird side angles or anything. Like the scene with the three men with him and where he eventually gets poisoned, and it's like him and the assistant and Mr. Alexander, and like the two of them, he's sitting right between them, and they're both like a bit closer. It really does like feel like something from a play.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's so good.
There's also the scene where he is on a stage when he's like
Yeah,
being demonstrated that the Ludovico technique works. Then he's literally on a stage.
yeah, that's really good, and that scene's really good too. With the whole, first thing, that woman is beautiful. Can we talk about that real quick? Oh my gosh, she is gorgeous. But that woman who comes out and the band is just like beating him up, and it's all.
Mhm.
And once again, a ton of POV shots in there. Like they definitely want you to feel for Alex, which is
Yeah, like when you see the woman like from below, like
yeah.
from his point of view. Yeah. Also, that whole scene is just so cool because like she comes out and then like there's this like weird like light on her that's like illuminating her in a very soft way, and then the music is playing these like weird eerie synth tones that are kind of like a theme throughout the movie. These kind of like almost like retro futurist like keyboard tones, and she just slowly walks towards him. It's like such a cool shot.
Um, what do you guys make of the ending? Because there's a couple weird things happening towards the end that I wasn't sure about.
Like what?
Okay, well, first thing, so just to clarify, like from an narrative perspective, Mr. Alexander does go to jail, right? Because they're very ambiguous, like what happened to him.
Wait, Mr. Alexander? There's a man named. Is that the author?
No, that's the yeah, that's author. Yeah.
Oh, I think so. I think there's something about it in the newspaper anyway.
Which, by the way, I think that's another interesting thing is that they're literally named Alex and Alexander.
Yeah, I didn't even catch that. That adds up that I didn't catch.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a book thing or a movie thing, so I don't want to like.
It's supposed to be very intentional because it's like I'm pretty sure it's like um the government is the minister, and then it's like he's the right, and then like Mr. Alexander is the left, and it's like obviously like at the end at least Alex is like supposed to be like in with Mr. Alexander, but like kind of like bouncing in between those two people is what Alex is supposed to do. It,
Mhm.
Wait, Alex supposed to be with Mr. Alexander at the end. I don't understand. Isn't
like
No, he's
he's
definitely
trying
with
to
the right
work
on
with
the
him.
end.
Yeah, no, at the end. I mean, like before the end, but like at
okay, yeah,
towards the second half of the movie.
sure.
Yeah.
You
Wait,
understand?
but my point is, was Mr. Alexander was that also his name in the book? Because I feel
Yeah,
like
of course.
so we probably shouldn't make too much of a thing of it. Um, that said, so what happens to him? Does he go to jail? Because they're very ambiguous. Like we took care of him, we put him in place, you know.
Yeah, he's gone.
And produce
But
subversive material.
do you think he's like we say he's gone? Here, do you mean he's in jail or he is like gone?
I mean, either way, he's like out of the picture, I think.
Sure, I feel like there's slight differences, but happens to him what we think of the movie. But if he's just in jail, he still has a voice, right? He can still like be an active participant. But like, if they really ended up using Alex basically to kill off this rival of theirs, if the right did, then that's a good.
Mm,
I think.
I think we can probably safely assume that he went to jail because when Alex is in jail, they are talking about wanting to do Ludovico technique so that they can rehabilitate the prisoners to make room for political prisoners.
Oh, interesting. I
Yeah,
didn't catch
so
that.
yeah, that could be something. But also, I don't even know if we should assume that he's going to have a voice in jail. Like, I think we're
Yeah,
supposed to assume like he's pretty much out of the picture, one way or the other.
and then this is really weird, like funny effect towards the end of the movie. Did you guys see that? Like,
What effect?
you get these POV shots from Alex of like the doctors and like the government people, like I think it's the government people as well. Yeah, I think it's that scene where, but like they're not. It's not shot super clearly. It's like a fuzzy kind of effect
Hmm,
on on
interesting.
face of
I didn't
actors
catch
when
that.
you're like look at it. Like like it's distorted, you know. Like Alex still isn't seeing clearly, but it's not like it eventually it's just a bit fuzzy the entire time. And
Hmm.
then also, like, is it fair to like at the end of the movie he is like once again bad?
Well, yeah, well, pretty much. I guess he's like back to his non-Ludovico state, and I don't think we're supposed to assume he's been rehabilitated any other way. So,
And that's
right, Matt.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think he was probably, you know, back to doing what he's doing.
oh
Yeah, I don't
sorry.
think we're. I don't think we're supposed to assume that he has been rehabilitated in any other way.
Yeah, I guess in the movie definitely not. It seems like, but so he's back to pre-Ludovico, but then like I don't know. I guess it's asked the question like, what does Alex do from here? Did you guys watch the movie on Netflix? Can I give you the Netflix timestamp for when this fuzzy effect comes in that I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
It's like 8 minutes, 30 seconds left in the film, like a bit over 2 hours, 8 minutes in the film.
Let's see. You said you're at 2 hours, 8 minutes?
Yeah.
Let's see if I
30
remember
seconds
this.
left. Although actually it starts before that too with like the nurse and stuff, but
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. It's almost like a rainbow effect around them or something, like a shimmer.
yeah.
I guess it is a POV shot, so it's supposed to maybe show him in his drugged out state or something.
Yeah, so like it makes you and I wonder how we can check that because if it is him in his drugged out state and like is he how seriously is Alex's gonna need a hint into the bargain here? You know what I mean? Like I guess he's already taken, the pictures from the initial press release, but like so I feel like it's really weird, right? Because Alex is like a rightist figure, correct? Or I guess he's neither,
No.
but
Yeah, he's
yeah, I
definitely
guess. Okay, sure. So are we to assume that like because it's fuzzy and stuff that what he's saying is like this is something like Alex is like not in like a full state of consciousness of and like he'll kind of eventually cross the government back in some sort of way or
Yeah,
what?
bro, I think he's just saying what they want to hear to like kind of. He's getting
You think
fed
at the
basically.
no, I think at the time though I think in this moment he's not though, right? He seems so like childlike and
Well, yeah, exactly. That's his point because they're like stuffing food in his mouth. So like in his animal state, he's just like, "Yep, whatever you say, just keep on putting that food in my mouth." And then he kind of like opens up his mouth and like they spoon some more food in. He's like, "Yep, keep it coming."
yeah.
I did think about that though, like if he was like mentally like inhibited in some way, because he does seem like even more childlike than he normally
Mhm.
does. But I don't know, he still seemed to be like, I don't know. I don't think he was supposed to be substantially changed. I don't know.
I guess like I almost wonder if like listening to the fact that these impulses that he had, like as he's first reverting back, because like in this scene he is he's fixed or whatever, right? He's his old way, but he's no longer thinking these things, and then like maybe it's like he's slowly coming back to like, oh wow, this is what I can think and this is what I can do now, and I don't know.
Yeah,
And
that
then
could be
it's
it.
so weird because gosh, this final shot too, we need to talk about it with them wrestling in the snow where everyone's like clapping around them.
Wait,
Or
wait, wait.
actually,
What?
I'm having sex, but like a wrestly kind of sex in the snow.
Yeah, the
Man,
gym
I gotta.
sequence.
Yeah, but it's what's up with it? Because like, okay, obviously it shows that he's back to his old ways. Then why is everyone clapping around him? I think there's something to this.
Hang on, let me watch this again.
Um,
Like the spectacle is now almost like the spectacle is now his like inappropriate manner, and it's almost like because because of what he went through, him being bad is now considered like a good thing for society,
Oh wait,
right?
that's him in the snow. I didn't even realize that.
I don't think it's. I mean, I guess we don't know for sure, but I think yeah, you can assume it's him in the snow. I think
Yeah,
it's
and it says I was cured, all right. Like he's definitely back to his old degen self, but now his degeneracy is being celebrated, and so it's
yeah,
almost kind
exactly.
of like it's commenting on this like pendulum of like attitudes in society and like the swing back and forth that always happens between right and left, where like his degeneracy will be condemned, and then they'll go too far, and then his degeneracy will be celebrated, but then he goes too far again, and then it's like this pendulum, but instead of like a pendulum like that eventually like loses energy and swings towards the center. It's like a pendulum that just keeps accelerating and swinging further and further either side.
So I kind of agree, but I also think it's commenting on the fact that like Alex is really just, I guess, once again, go back to the whole will thing and kind of tie it up here. It's like how Alex is viewed has nothing to do with like Alex's own actions, right? It's entirely to do with, you know, the situation around him, right? Like the reason his parents feel bad for him is because of what they read in a newspaper article, right?
Yeah.
And like there's this irony that because he is back to who he was, because he's back to his authentic self, it's okay for his authentic self to be like, super terrible human being.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's like kind of bizarreness of that, like of how society views people and like almost how we're willing to. I think that's another like big takeaway I got from this movie is like how we're almost willing to forgive people, like if enough tragedies happen to them,
Yeah, that's totally true.
and like which is like doesn't really make any sense, right? And because like Alex having these sort of like super sexual thoughts, Alex, eventually if he hurts people and stuff, we shouldn't be happy that well at least he's back to his old self again. But for some reason we do, and like I said,
Yeah.
I also think all these like POV shots of the movie are super intentional, right?
Mhm.
Because like and those POV shots, by the way, don't start like when Alex is in jail. I think they start at least from the murder scene. Like I remember there's some in there too,
Yeah.
where like
Well, and it's the whole thing with like where they come in and blast the symphony on the speakers. It's like we are
Mhm.
supposed to be happy that he's cured. It's like, oh look, we get to listen to the Beethoven again. Like
yeah,
he's reclaimed what his personality, and so like it's like no matter how bad he is, we're still gonna celebrate his free will and his appreciation for beauty in the
but
world.
yeah, even if it's not necessarily like what's actually right, it's
Yeah,
almost like
it's
man, he really should just stayed in jail and probably should go back to jail, but.
yeah, for sure.
There's ludicrosity there. We should probably get on to Chimes at Midnight because we are.
Agree.
Okay, what do you think of Chimes at Midnight?
I thought it was kind of hard to follow. A little.
I agree. But who
And
have not had the opportunity to follow it yet, Chimes at Midnight, it is a compilation basically of Shakespeare plays, from my understanding, with some stuff added in as well. But basically, the two main characters are Sir John Falstaff and then Hal is his name, correct?
yep.
Who is the son of King Henry. Um,
Also known as Henry V.
yeah. Also, wait,
Prince of
Hal
Hal
Henry V.
is Henry
Yeah,
V.
yeah. Was it? I don't. Yeah, I think it's that's Henry IV. Yeah. So, and basically, Hal at the time, I'm gonna call him Derek because that's who he is to us throughout the movie. He's just a hooligan who messes around with Falstaff and to just kind of wank around for at least the first half of the movie where they're like, but then it's weird because although like Hal seems to like really care for Falstaff, he also like definitely considers him a joke, right? Where like there's the scene where Falstaff like robs those men and then Hal robs Falstaff and like they'll let him like continue lying about it until he admits what's going on.
Yeah, because uh, at this point, like Prince Hal has like isn't really a fan of him. He's like just like, this dude's a meme. I'm just gonna follow this dude around and make fun of him. He's like,
Closer, right, as things go on.
yeah.
But I wouldn't really say there's like one defining scene, would you, where the two are like super close?
When I'd say like the second scene, I think when he's like Falstaff's like just like talking shit about Prince Hal and is just like, you're talking shit about me, is like just kind of much more cheery about it than like the
Yeah.
first scene that we see here, where he's like, "Are you lying about the robbers? There weren't like 100 men."
Mhm.
It's like it's kind of just like a gradual shift. It's not supposed to be like a big shift, I think.
Yeah, but then this is kind of speaking of pendulums, eventually the pendulum swings in the other direction because there's a big battle where Hal ends up not being like I guess a war hero, but he's a bit of a war hero, right?
Yeah.
And Henry the Fourth, after that, he gets very sick and dies, and Hal's now Henry the Fifth, and he takes over the throne, and he casts Falstaff out of the kingdom, where Falstaff dies of a broken heart.
Yeah, so I think that I had a hard time figuring out who everyone was in this movie, barring Hal and Falstaff, because all of the side characters like weren't really differentiated in like a major way to me.
Yes,
And
either aesthetically or like narratively, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think to like show a contrast, not to like start talking about a random movie, but I just watched Ivan the Terrible, and that movie did a really good job of like the costume design was like so exaggerated, or not exaggerated, but like differentiated, I guess you can say, for every character, that like it was never hard to tell people apart. And so I think like at least there are better ways to do it than were done in this movie, I think, to help differentiate characters.
Caleb, what you're
Well,
trying to tell us
the thing
is
is like there's fewer characters in that movie, and like that's the kind of like the aesthetic of this time is like they're not. It would be way too crazy to have like exaggerated costumes or like anything but what they are, because these people are not like rich enough to have like fancy clothes with fancy accessories and accessories
Well,
and
except
decorations.
some are though.
yeah, but the main time I have a problem with this is in the court. That's like the main time that I can't tell people apart. I'm like, is this guy king? Is this guy like Hotspur? Who is this guy?
That's because it doesn't matter who they are. It's just
No, I think it matters though.
no. It just matters who the Earl of like Northumberland is, and he who joins like the Poins, or not Poins, the other dude, whatever his name is, doesn't matter. But it's like really doesn't matter. Oh, Henry Percy and his father, who's I guess Earl of Worcestershire, or but it doesn't matter what he's Earl of. It's like Henry Percy, Kate Percy, and like Doll, the prostitute mistress of the bar, and it's kind of like the judge, but or justice, and it's kind of like, you don't really need to know that his name. He's just justice. It's kind of like this is a merry band of dudes going around, and like they have to fight against Henry Percy. That's why you know who Henry Percy is. And it's like the earls and like the nobles of the court are just unnecessary information.
Also, I think like considering this was adapted from a play, in its original incarnation, or like at least in the Shakespearean version, like it would be live, so it wouldn't be black and white.
Well,
so it'd be easier to tell people apart via like the colors of their clothing.
This isn't adapted from one play. This is adapted from like 4 plays put together and adapted.
Yeah, but in all of those plays, it would not be in black and white. And they would all be on the stage. So, and additionally, I think in a play you can definitely get away with like having more exaggerated costume. So there's no reason why that couldn't have been done here to help.
It's not. This isn't a play. This is a film, and what Wells wants to do is this is a period drama. Having exaggerated clothes in a period drama would not make sense.
But it would though, because it's Shakespeare.
No, this is not a Shakespeare. This is Wells making a film
entirely from Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Let me finish my point, okay?
Oh.
Jesus Christ. Okay, this is Wells has a character that he loves from Shakespeare, yes, but he's creating basically a period drama using like snippets of what he wants to use to make a story about them, and he's making intentional adjustments to it to create a period drama set in this time, making the dress and whatnot of these random side characters that are unimportant exaggerated will take away from that what he wants to achieve, which is.
Okay, but I think his point though is that this is a movie in mid 1965, correct?
Yeah.
1967. Can be in color, right? Why can't it just be in color? And like that would help those sort of things. Like, I mean, obviously like I don't want to say the black and white to color is like a small adaptation. It's one that should be in his wheelhouse, right? Or at least it's in like a lot of other directors who we're going to talk about wheelhouses.
Yeah. Also, apparently, I read
Also, what I
something
think
about
Caleb
how.
was trying to say is that now that John Ford is out and Caleb's talking about Ivan the Terrible, that Sergei Eisenstein shouldn't have beaten John Ford. I think is the other thing that Caleb was trying to say here.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, sorry.
But I do think that the black and white like does have a certain aesthetic effect. It kind of makes it seem gloomy at times, and there's also like all these shots in the court that are like super gorgeous, and the way they always shoot the king like from below is really cool. And so even though the shots in the court, because of the black and white, made it hard to tell people apart, it did lend it an aesthetic quality that I really enjoyed.
Who are you having trouble telling apart though? Like that's my question.
Like pretty much everyone. Like there'd just be randomly people talking, and I literally just couldn't tell them apart or know who they were at all.
Except for
I recognized Falstaff, recognized Hal, I recognized Poins pretty well, and I recognized King Henry. Basically every other man in the movie I was pretty confused about.
Yeah, also like the way that we're introduced to the characters, at least in the court, is like literally like they're like walking by in a procession.
yeah,
And then
who are
it's
you
like,
having trouble?
and there is this man, and there is Hotspur, and then it's like once that scene is
Oh.
done, it's like we're never reintroducing them again. So
Because-
it's like, well,
yeah.
I remember that scene really well.
No, because it doesn't matter who they are. Like, or at least I'm imagining you're talking about like the random court people that just follow the king around.
No, it's like these are the nobles that
No, we're talking about the nobles, dude.
they
Yeah.
literally address them by name.
Yeah,
Like the
most
Earl
of those
of
people are not important.
Northumberland,
Yeah,
the Earl of Worcester.
Yeah, yeah.
Hotspur.
But if they're not important, then why are they being introduced by name?
well, Earl of Northumberland is always wearing a very distinctive cross, and even has a cross on his armor in the battle. So it's like that's just that dude. And the Earl of Worcester is just like following Northumberland around. So it doesn't really matter. Those are the only two like nobles that you really need to know. Other than the king, of course, but the king's obvious.
I mean, you definitely need to know Hotspur as well, right? They're
I mean, maybe, but or like Hotspur, but that's Henry Percy. Like if you can't tell Henry Percy, that's on you. He literally has like a dozen close-up shots, and he's like only shown from the face.
I guess, but our point is that some of the faces look very similar of the characters,
Yeah, but whenever he talks, you see his face.
and that extends to like also Hal and Points also look like a lot of these guys.
Kind of,
Very.
except for
strapping
I'm
looking.
confused. How can you not tell him if he's like just like in a solo shot, basically most of the time with his face right there? He's like rarely in a crowd. Maybe like once when they're like going leaving the fort on horseback.
Because he looks like the other characters. I mean, how can I not tell? He looks like the other characters, which is why I cannot tell. Like,
What do you mean he looks like the other characters? Like he looks...
I mean, his face looks like the face of the other characters. I understand that the close-up makes it harder because we don't get to see like any of his costume, right? Any of the clothes that he usually wears. That is why it's hard to tell.
Well, literally the first scene you see him in, he's naked, so it's kind of like I guess you could tell him from his butt.
I guess. I also agree with Caleb on that. I think like it was a bit hard to follow this film. I don't think it's like the most insane thing to say. Although I do think some of that was intentional, like in a good way. Like one thing I really liked about this film was how a lot of the court scenes and like basically any scene with like the nobles, the dialogue was like, much more difficult to follow, right? And then the scenes with like Falstaff and the boys at the bar or the inn or whatever it was, bar/inn, I guess. Like it was, I had no trouble following those scenes, and I think part of that was because the dialogue was much easier. But I think that's kind of part of the theme, which is kind of ludicrosity of the I guess they probably weren't references to the bourgeois at that time, but of the aristocracy.
Yeah.
How like Falstaff really does present like this really nice, like easy alternative.
Mm-hmm. So are we supposed to feel like sympathetic for Falstaff at all when he gets like rejected at the end, or are we supposed to see the king rejecting him as like the natural progression of like maturity.
Yeah, pretty much. This is Falstaff's like son growing up and becoming a man. That's why it's like Wells's expression at that moment is so important. It's like sadness, but like also like joy at like him like basically becoming who he needs to be, and like pride that this is like his boy.
hmm But in other words, I guess what a way to rephrase what I'm asking is like, are we supposed to like condemn Hal for like rejecting Falstaff, or is this supposed to be like what he's supposed to do and like his natural like that's just like what happens as you get older, you reject the ways of your childhood?
I don't think we're at the very least we're not supposed to condemn Hal because
hmm
Falstaff doesn't.
I think
Okay.
you can't condemn Hal because of how difficult the choice he made was, right? Like
hmm
how like we established, like I was saying with the core dialogue thing, right? Like all is that and like other like kind of like which we can get to later, like how like these are shot, it's like very easy proven like this is the easier way of life is with Falstaff,
Yeah,
right? Like King is the harder choice. So you can never really criticize someone for making the harder choice.
that's true. But couldn't he have like become the king and then, as Falstaff thought would happen, like elevated Falstaff to some position?
He could have, but that would be been like immoral, and that would have weakened his position as king, and et cetera, all the political stuff. So like this is like as like that's why his father's like this is why you had to do this because like he's aware of that, and like
hmm
Hal's also aware of that because he's not dumb.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like him making the hard choice that he needs to, and Falstaff being proud of him for it.
yeah. Let's see.
But
I
yeah,
thought the whole coronation scene was like really beautifully shot too. I think that was my favorite part of this movie. Is like there were just some really great shots.
Oh, for sure. The fight scene's also like super impressive, I think.
Yeah,
the whole
apparently
like war was incredible.
Yeah.
they did that with only like 100 extras or something like
Yeah.
that.
I
Yeah,
also read that YouTube comment, Caleb. So
Oh, this wasn't a YouTube comment. This was a Wikipedia entry.
oh,
but yeah,
I read the
it
YouTube
was
comment.
like that whole scene had like such incredible like just cuts and everything like everything about it was just so good. Also, I love the fight between Hal and Henry, in that it's a surprise when Hal wins,
Mm-hmm.
and just because of how like the shot is done, you don't see him coming or winning at all, which is great. Definitely adds a lot to that scene.
Yeah, so we're supposed to like understand the narrative of like why this war is happening at all, because like all the politics stuff, like I just like I didn't get.
Oh well, Henry
The
Percy.
beginning kind of touches on it.
Yeah, well, it just like Henry Percy um wants to rebel or whatever. Um, oh the uh and then
There was a
war.
reason that he wanted to rebel. The king who was
Well, it's like
current King Henry was not the rightful heir to the throne, I believe.
no, it's yeah, pretty much like Richard II was killed, and his actual heir uh Mortimer it was jailed in Wales. And then like Mortimer's cousin Northumberland, Worcestershire, and Henry Percy, his like nephew or whatever, were like, well, we're gonna rebel.
hmm
Well,
Yeah,
or
so
we're
all that
gonna
stuff I
rebel
was getting
because
like
like Henry the fourth could have because like Wales is like a separate nation and Mortimer was a prisoner there because of, like the conflict that happened with Richard II because he like died there or whatever. So like Henry the fourth had to was like, no, I'm not gonna go save him, and like Henry Percy and whatnot were like, well, that's messed up. We're gonna go revolt against you, and then go get Henry or not Henry, Mortimer.
Yeah, so all that stuff I basically like wasn't able to pick up on over the course of the movie. So maybe if I watched it, it'd make a little more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that sentiment. One thing I will say though is like, I think part of the reason that is though is because there's not really like the necessary emotion behind it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is like the one thing I wish like on the politics end, right? Where like this is like a big rebellion, and I'm still not sure like where I'm supposed to come away on like, wait, so it's like I don't know, I guess the Henrys, the fourth and fifth, like, are they in the wrong here? Like, should I? Because
Yeah.
Cal, right? But he kind of takes this unrightful kinghood, and that was kind of just the fad back then. Things like that I didn't exactly
Yeah,
understand.
it's just like a power move. It's like not right or wrong. I don't think Wells wants to make a statement on it. That's why it's like kind of an aside thing. What's important that like Henry the Fourth is now has to field against the rebellion, and he needs his reject son Hal to step it up.
I guess that makes me feel less bad about not getting it then if it was basically not that important anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. It's like not important. It's important like narratively, obviously, but it's kind of like
I mean, this is more of a
it
family drama than anything else,
yeah,
right?
it's more like a this is more of a classic comedy drama than like a war film or like something about like politics in like the 1400s.
Hmm.
Well, Derek, how do you think Wells heightened this family dramedy?
I think because he intentionally did a lot of face shots. I think that's like an effect, like so much emotion on like Falstaff's and Hal's, like focusing on that dynamic and like their faces, how they interact with one another. I think that's like a key. Like if you just show like what they're doing, that's like not important because this is obviously a family drama. But showing how they feel about one another and what they're doing is what's important. That's why most of the time it's just face shots and like their bodies and whatnot. But you get a good look at their faces, and also all the fun stuff that they do, like memeing one another just in general. I think it gives like an almost like Three Stooges quality to it when Falstaff's like made king of the bar or whatever, and he puts on the hat, walking around. But
There are definitely some good
Yeah.
bro moments.
Yeah, there's definitely some, like, and not even just bro though, right? It's like just like just the work class moments, right?
Hmm.
It's like the girls getting it on too. The girls are having a
That's true.
hollering time.
Yeah.
That one guy had to ruin it. That police officer. That one whole scene where that's where he cutting up like he's like the king and stuff like that.
also, I don't know. Whenever I watch this, it's just really impressive what he did with like the material that he's using. Like
Sure.
it's like four different plays, and he's like weaving it together like seamlessly. Just and like cutting out the parts that he doesn't need because he's obviously just focused on Falstaff, and like that would be incredibly hard. Like that is incredibly hard to make a like say like you're given like four books in a series and like you're told to like cut them apart, make one character the focal point. Like oh
Yeah. That is pretty cool.
it's like okay let me try. It's like there's like I imagine that's like just almost a Herculean task like to do well.
And it's such a cool way to like tell the story
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
basically like rehash the source material in like a really interesting way. So that's pretty dang cool. And this definitely like shows Orson Welles like directorial clout. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's I think what one of the great things that Orson Welles does well is like you can tell when you're watching an Orson Welles movie. Like he just puts himself all over it.
Definitely agree. Do you really think though that it's like flows seamlessly? And I guess it's like more a writing thing. But I
I
guess we have to
yeah, I
evaluate the
think this is
writing
like
skill because they're pretty much all writer directors. I feel like to me it definitely feels like multiple stories mashed into one. Like I don't think it's super seamless. I'm getting a
I
phone
think it's
call.
pretty seamless considering that like
I hope it's not important.
in most
Okay.
uh Like most of the plays, Falstaff isn't like a huge character.
Yeah, it doesn't feel super seamless to me. I don't know.
I think it's super well done, and it's like considering that how he sets it up pretty much allows him to, because he's like there's all these jumps in times which he allows for, and it's like these dark cuts. I think that he does it very intentionally to give that away. So I think he's doing a lot of directorial things to help himself a lot. So maybe that's what you're feeling is like those harsh cuts. But I think that's like very good touch in my opinion.
Yeah, and I guess like even if like some of the more like narrative or politic-y heavy stuff like might have some jarring transitions, like as we kind of already established, like that kind of stuff doesn't really matter. And what's important is basically like the personal journey of like these two characters pretty much. And like that to me doesn't feel that jarring, I guess. Like that always feels like it flows from like a pretty logical series of events, and like they even kind of foreshadow the fact that Hal is gonna have to like leave Falstaff behind like a couple times, I think. So it doesn't ever feel like at least that aspect of the movie is jarring.
Yeah, I'd say even the political stuff is not jarring. Like the dude wants to rebel, or wants to go rescue his nephew, or I guess his uncle. It's like, okay, I need you to go save my uncle Henry. It's like Henry's like, no, okay, we're gonna rebel. It's like, okay, then we're gonna go rebel, and here's the war. The war is over. We lose.
Yeah. Do you guys think you're ready to go to the quote section and whatnot?
I want to say something real quick because like this is probably like the reason why I think this is like the greatest adaptation of like or like I guess not adaptation because he's like literally just taking what he wants, but like based on like Shakespeare work is like at the end Falstaff moves to Falstaff moves to Falstaff moves to or is dead, and like the mistress does like the famous quote at the end, which is like that quote at the end is like super famous because it's like the only thing in Merry Wives of like Windsor that like is said about like Falstaff's death, and like Falstaff was like a big favorite, or like it's Henry V. My bad. Is like was like that's the only time his death's mentioned, and it's like that quote at the end, like almost near the end of and it's like so interesting because at the end, when he says that quote or when she says that quote, it's like very heartwarming and touching. Like he's not in hell, he's in Arthur's bosom. If ever man went to Arthur's bosom, and obviously all this happy stuff. And like obviously, audience has seen that the mistress like literally just like hates him pretty much, or at least gets like a meme by him a lot. And then she says this stuff, and it's like, and then the guys that are like gonna carry his coffin or whatever, like they say he cried out of sack and woman, nay that he did not. It's like they're basically like that's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah. He definitely like doesn't really have that many redeeming qualities besides like kind of being like a chill guy to hang out with, I guess you could say. But
yeah,
kind of, yeah.
Well, Falstaff's just like such a charismatic character, and it's like that's and we kind of like see that's why Wells loves him. That's why he sees himself as Falstaff. Is like so it's kind of like him being aware that like this is like his favorite character. Is like yeah that quote about his death that's some BS.
Yeah. So Matt and I were kind of discussing this briefly before we started the podcast, but are there any other Shakespearean recurring characters.
Well, Falstaff's one, because he's in like literally 4 other plays.
Yeah, but besides him,
That's
are there any?
I think I can't think of any. There's definitely some though, because like
Okay.
let me think.
You know, guys, a Google search would probably really help us here. Shakespeare.
Oh, Pistol,
Recur.
obviously. So basically, the characters in this, like, Pistol, Richard III, Henry V. So like, pretty much these characters, or like in the Merry Band, like Prince Hal and stuff like that. It's like pretty much his only recurring characters, other than maybe the ones that he like been lost, the plays that been lost of time. He probably did like recurring characters in there, I imagine, because like that's just what playwrights do.
So, also apparently, Mark Antony is in multiple plays.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, Julius
Okay.
Caesar and Cleo.
I don't think, yeah, and Anthony Cleopatra. Yeah, he's in both. And there's a couple other people in those who also are in those 2 plays that are like, that's those, and then people kind of in the histories. Which I guess Julius Caesar doesn't count as a history, which is kind of weird. But
Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this movie.
I'm kind of with you. We ready to move on to the votes?
The quotes and stuff. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yes, yeah. Those the awards, I guess. We have better, I guess, awards.
Awards.
First, let's do step up or step down, which is our newest award and my personal favorite. You know, already new fave, new hotness was oh my gosh, sorry. Was A Clockwork Orange a step up or a step down
Step up.
from
Step up.
Shining?
Step up.
I agree for sure. Was Chimes at Midnight a step up or a step down from F for Fake?
Step
up.
down.
You guys gotta not talk at the same time. Derek, what you say?
Step up.
Derek said step up. Caleb said step down. I'm with Caleb. I think it was also a step down. It was literally our #1 movie of the other ones.
Yeah, that movie slapped.
#1 movie quality. I like this movie. I think it was well written, but I think that it wasn't quite doing as much for me as F for Fake was. You know.
Yeah, I completely agree. F for Fake was actually super inventive and had a lot of stuff going on and was very clever. This was a well done movie that kind of had its one thing that it was doing, and it did that one thing pretty damn well. But didn't hit me on a lot of levels.
Okay. Next, favorite quote. Oh, I also okay. Let's think about that. Favorite quote.
I have a few, but when the mistress is setting your manhood aside, thou art whatnot, is basically ragging on him. But then he's saying basically the same format. Falstaff is setting thou womanhood aside, thou art a beast to say otherwise. I was like, I died laughing.
I also the one from Clockwork Orange that I liked. I also like this from Clockwork Orange. We are not convinced with motives, with higher. Why do I? With the higher ethics, we are concerned only with cutting down crime. And I just thought it was a real telling quote. So that's probably, but I think still the movie one was my favorite. Then also from Chimes at Midnight, I really did like a reference at the top of the podcast. But she's neither fish nor flesh. A man knows not where to have her. That was real fun.
Yeah. Oh, also, another one from Chimes. Go hide thee, Jack. Now my master is for a true face and good conscience. And then Hal says, both of which I have had, but their date is out, and therefore I'll hide me. I was like, that's a funny way to say that. I thought that was clever.
My favorite was the TV one. Let's see if I can.
I got you.
Here.
It's funny how
the colors of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, only seem real when you video them on a screen. which is
So,
like,
I feel like they use the word "viddy" like in 5 different contexts in this movie.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
because this is a classic teen boy using his favorite word.
yeah, man. There's like so many great like slang words that I really want to use like in real life because they're so catchy.
Mhm.
Like instead
What?
of saying like sorry, like apologies, and then calling wine like vino, stuff like that.
I
They
didn't
really
catch
stick in my head pretty good.
apologies.
Yeah,
And like I sure he was saying, it's really funny.
yeah.
Favorite scene?
Oof.
I actually really liked the initial hunting scene. I thought it was actually super duper well done in Chimes at Midnight
Yeah.
because like the first part's like pretty good, right? With like, the whole like watching them go, but then afterwards we get the chase scene with Hal and Poins where they're chasing all the motley crew of Falstaff and them.
Mhm.
Beautiful shots of the trees and stuff. As we like what's the word I'm looking for? So we go across, pan across. Oh, it's so beautiful, but then it's also so funny and like fun and all that. So it works on like a lot of levels, I think. Derek,
Uh,
I think
what
Caleb wants to go.
I was just gonna say I mentioned it before, but when he's reading the Bible and then it cuts to
Oh,
him being a Roman legionnaire, whipping Jesus, and then also like it then cuts to him like kind of going further on this metaphor, like cuts to him with like a harem of topless women that are like feeding him grapes or something like that, and it's just so like visually stimulating and excessive from like a viewer's point of view, but also like from Alex's moral standpoint. It really just captures the whole thing.
for sure. Derek,
Mm, tough choice, but I like I think the one I enjoyed the most was the scene where uh Falstaff's like going around acting like a king or whatnot, and he has like the fake hat on. There's like the pan on his head. I thought that was really funny, and like how he
oh yeah,
shot that, like the camera's like never not moving. I thought that was like really cool,
Hmm.
and it's like going like
nice.
up and down and stuff. It's just like really incredible.
Yeah, it's super fun, and then of course it's followed up with like all of them hiding, which is like equally, I guess chaotic, but like also in a really good way.
Mhm.
Okay, so favorite character.
Falstaff.
Yeah, I guess it kind of has to be right.
Yeah, agree.
Sounds Caleb's gonna hit us with, the Duke of Warschmeister or something. Best performance.
Falstaff or Orson Welles.
Ooh, I'm definitely going Malcolm McDowell as Alex. I felt like he's actually such an amazing job and such a range. It was actually really worth it
Yeah,
for me.
this is actually a really tough decision because both their performances are really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess kind of for a similar reason that you said, Alex, like his range is a little bit greater. Oh,
Yeah,
never
except
mind.
for Falstaff goes from like lying through his face in like one moment, like with pride and like, yeah, you're not gonna catch me, to like basically like, trying to like defensively like lie his way out. Is like in like,
Yeah, it's Orson Welles.
Okay.
Performance was really good.
Time to vote on the movies. I'll go first.
ooh,
I'm Clockwork Orange. I
ooh,
liked both movies. I thought Times of Midnight was good, but like Caleb's kind of thing, it doesn't really hit me on that emotional level. And also like it's tough because I was just a bit confused while watching it. I thought Clockwork Orange super duper surprised me because I didn't expect that movie to be quite bad. Just because I thought it was gonna be excessive and violent, but ended up being really good, and I really enjoyed it from start to finish. I think there's a lot to chew on there. Derek,
uh, I picked Chimes at Midnight. I thought the feat of what Orson Welles trying to do was just too impressive. And like, I don't know, I disagree. I emotionally I was hit definitely more by Chimes at Midnight than Clockwork Orange. I thought Clockwork Orange was interesting, but I wasn't like compelled by the character to like him or think of his plight. I was interested in what he represented for the film, but not like emotionally.
interesting. I was definitely very emotionally connected to Alex, like one way or the other. Caleb, there's a vote.
Yep, Clockwork Orange. It was the
Caleb
Bond
goes the
movie.
Clockwork Orange.
Yep.
Want to give us any reason?
Well, I think pretty similar to like what you said. Chimes at Midnight was hard to follow. And yeah, like it kind of tells us like pretty interesting story of like maturity and coming of age and stuff, but like I didn't feel like terribly invested in that. And while it was done well, like it's kind of like the only thing that it was doing because as we've kind of already established, the narrative was not really of any importance. Whereas a Clockwork Orange, like there's a lot to talk about. Like it's really difficult to like derive any sort of like concrete meaning because it's so nuanced and back and forth. Yeah, lots to talk about there, and
Yeah.
also just visually, like an absolute banger.
Oh, for sure. I'm a bit surprised that you said that it is like definitively the more ambitious film because I agree that it's like the more, how do I say this? Like maybe from a writing perspective it's more ambitious, but just because it's more ambitious from a writing perspective, I think like a movie is attempting to make you feel sympathetic for Alec, for a person who's like a murderer, like all the themes and like all the themes it's hitting on. I'm surprised you say like I could see how it's like arguably more ambitious, but definitely not like definitively like you're making it out to be.
I would say definitively, but disagree with me.
Well, that's it for this podcast. Next week we are watching Taboo by F.W. Murnau and North by Northwest by Alfred Hitchcock. Understand, Caleb?
I understand. I am.
We're watching
It's gonna be
Taboo by F.W. Murnau.
now
Mm-hmm.
and North by Northwest by uh Hitchcock.
Yeah,
Bam, we got it locked in.
there you go. So next time, remember to have a great year and to watch more movies.